Another special one here with Marcus Ryle, Rob Rosen, my best friend Rob Rosen. Rob introduced me to Marcus. Marcus has this incredible history that kind of covers all the important stuff from 1980 forward. And I'm not even going to intro it. We're just going to talk about it instrument at a time. And through the story of each instrument, we're going to kind of go backwards in time and bring you, I'm getting like the chill from it, like this great history of electronic music and synthesizers, and even how it kind of all worked and what the inspiration was for people to create music. And having someone like Marcus, like if you don't know Marcus, you're going to find out how important he is and like how much a part of the Mount Rushmore of the great synthesizer engineers, designers, minds, and how he influenced some of the other great ones.
Certainly.
So,
and probably leave pretty grateful after watching this video. This guy has democratized music many times.
Certainly true. And for guitar players.
Even guitar players.
We'll get
No, watch out.
But keyboards were always first.
Yeah. So let's dive in.
Oberheim two-voice, 1974. First Oberheim I ever played. My friend Randy Stern got one. I was so jealous. Then the Oberheim four-voice came out shortly thereafter. 75, the programmers added. Of course, 79, the OB-Xa came out, followed by very early 80, the OB-SX. And then around July of 1980, when I joined Oberheim, the OB-Xa was in development. And its concept was pretty straightforward. It's like the OB-Xa, which by the way, it's X, was because the number of voices that you could get was up to you, right? The Prophet 5 was a 5 voice. The Prophet 10 was a 10 voice. The OB-Xa could be 4, 6, or 8 voices.
I think you could also do 2.
You could do, yeah, it's true. You could put whatever voices you want. And all voices had the same sound. So it's just, they were on voice cards. So you could just decide how many voices you wanted. After the OB-Xa in 81 came the DSX sequencer, the DMX drum machine in 81 and 82.
I believe the OB-8 is 83.
83, you're probably right. You would know. 1983, we came out with the OB-8, which was the last of that generation's OB series. And after that, we made a pretty radical shift in our design. And in 1984, came out with the Oberheim Xpander, which is a 6-voice multi-timbral, followed in 85 by the Matrix-12, which was 2 expanders with a velocity keyboard. So this is 12 voice, hence the 12. And in late 85, actually after I left Oberheim, the Matrix-6 was introduced.
So you came into the picture, the OB-Xa was kind of going.
Yeah, so
but not done, right?
Right. So I joined Oberheim, and Tom and Jim were working on the OB-Xa. It didn't have the blue stripes yet. The idea was just an OB-Xa had, the voice cards were set up so that you had 4 voices on a bottom tray and 4 voices on the top. And actually, interesting enough, Michel Doidic, who had, he was in France working at a place called Piano Center, which was a big music store and had a lot of synthesizers, and he was a repair technician. And he was modifying OB-Xs to allow it to be multi-timbral. And which is how Tom ended up meeting Michel. And I think I might have even been because of that they got the idea, why don't we do one where we split the 4 voices, we'll have separate control voltages for each set of 4 voices, and we will make it so that you can do splits and doubles. Now, it retained the X name. It's the OB-Xa because you still could decide how many voice cards were in it, but you just had to have now an even number of voice cards.
4, 6, or 8.
Because you wanted to, have them be the same on the top and bottom. So they said, it'll have 2 sounds. It can do splits and doubles. I said, that's great. So how's someone going to use that? I said, well, you'll hit split, and it's split keyboard at the middle C, or you can hit double, and it puts them on top of each other.
It also competes with the Jupiter 8 at the time, right?
Yeah, I believe it was before the Jupiter 8. The Jupiter 8 came out after the OB-Xa.
Oh, so it could do the splits and doubles before the Jupiter 8?
Correct. The Jupiter 8 was 1981.
Yeah, so this was
But
19...
the chroma.
I thought
could
this was
do it.
83.
Oh, no, 83 was the OB-8. So the
Oh, this is
OB-Xa
earlier.
was, again, it was in development in 80. It shipped in 81. And I remember when the Jupiter 8 came out, because we definitely got one and took a look inside
Really?
when that came out. I was at Oberheim when that was introduced. So we're working on this guy, and I guess my first contribution, because I was gigging so much, I'm like right away going, well, splits are great, but what if I don't want to split at the middle C? And what if I want to do like a string pad with my left hand and a lead with my right? Because I've got a bass player. It's like I need to transpose that keyboard. And what if I want to just bend notes on one half and not the other? And what if I need to change the balance between the two? That's good. If I'm going to double, I need to be able to control the balance. And so I can only imagine at the time, Tom and Jim were probably rolling their eyes at what has this kid done? So, but I tried to bring solutions. So there's, the OB-Xa was kind of the first one where there was kind of hidden features. So first of all, it's working here. If you were in a split, let's see, there's clearly two sounds. And we can see the splits there. It's like, well, it's software controlled. This is microprocessor or digitally controlled analog synthesizer. Since the keyboard and the control panel are scanned by the processor, we can add software to add features. So why not be able to hold the split button and hit a note and change the split point? Or hold split and lower and hit a note and transpose the keyboard.
Quickly.
Right.
You know what? I've worked on so many of these, and I did not know that you could transpose the splits and doubles on the Xa.
Well, you can do it on the OB-8 too.
Well, I know that because that
Oh.
gets scrambled all the time. But not
Oh,
on
that's
the
a good
XA.
point. Yeah, so that's really the origins of it. And then, the fact that there was a balance control. The balance control we added because you got to be able to control the balance between the upper and lower voices and so on. So these were some of the things. I wouldn't say I was a designer on the OB-Xa, but I was able to influence it. Probably the thing I had the most influence in designing, which is actually was a good lesson for me, and I'm even a little embarrassed by it, was the bend box. Because the bend box was still at this stage largely an analog beast. In other words, it was literally a control voltage goes to the oscillators when you bend up and down, and a control voltage controls the amount of LFO when you do the mod lever, and so on. And you can see the bend box on the OBX was a very simple undertaking, right? You just decided whether you want your pitch bend to be narrow or broad, and you could make it so you could bend
Narrow,
just one
broad.
oscillator, and you could transpose. So you can see I threw a boatload of controls into this bend box because I wanted to be able to control which oscillators get modulation, control the pitch bend range, and be able to have a dedicated LFO, because in the OBX it was using the mod LFO, so a dedicated LFO for vibrato, multiple waveforms, the ability to set an amount of vibrato with a knob as well as the lever, and of course the lower and upper buttons, so that if you were in split, you could bend one side and not the other, or do the vibrato on one side and not the other. That all sounds fine, and on paper it's not that big a deal. We'll just add some switches and stuff. It's a fair amount of analog circuitry, and the worst part is it, you'll remember best, I think there's like 8 trimmers in the bend, just for the bend box.
Depends on the revision.
7 or 8, you're right. Just to control all of those features, right? So at that stage, I didn't understand that things like op amps have offsets. And an offset is just a little bit added and subtracted voltage, right? For example. So if you don't have trim adjustments, you might have it where it's going to be out of tune when you turn on a modulation or things like that.
That's right.
So that was a really valuable lesson for me. It worked great. I got rid of my OBX and immediately was gigging with the OB-Xa.
Right.
But I experienced, it's like, okay, we got to make sure that bend box is calibrated right, because otherwise things are out of tune, and it's kind of annoying. So that became basically the OB-Xa has the most trimmers of any Oberheim.
I'd say
Right.
most trimmers of most synthesizers.
Most synthesizers.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically 2 4-voice synths
Yes.
in one, because you have to remember there's also routing. Like if it's in whole mode, it uses 1 LFO for all 8 voices, and then as soon as you go to split, then you have a different LFO for one side or the other, and then those can be independently calibrated. The portamento times can be different.
That's right.
There's so many different things, and as you know, there's no shortage of voltage summing going on in
A
these.
lot of summing,
And when
a
you
lot
talk
of
about offsets,
match resistors and
longer to repair and maintain than.
the calibration
Yeah.
process. I mean, I believe there's over 150 trimmers. So trimmers, it's basically a potentiometer. It's a knob, small knob you can adjust with a screwdriver. For those that haven't been into the insides of one of these things, and it could take quite a while to calibrate the whole thing. And it also only actually tunes on one note. It has an auto-tune feature to bring all the oscillators in tune. But the OB-X, OB-SX, and OB-Xa, it all tunes one pitch to all be in tune. But the volt per octave, basically the tracking of every oscillator, is a manual trim. And if those are off, you could be in tune up here and way out of tune at the other end of the keyboard.
though it was the volt per octave on these is fairly stable.
It is stable. But what you got to remember, you said earlier, these were tools. These are musical tools. So as designers, now I'm like really digging deep and understanding how all of this stuff works and realizing this is a concern, right? It's like if you're mission critical, you're on a big tour or something, the technician really needs to know how to calibrate this if things go bad. It's a lot of stuff. Wouldn't it be great if we could make something that's more reliable? And Michel Douadic, who was at Oberheim at that time, he really started the process for us of thinking what types of controls could be in software. And actually, the latest version of OB-Xa, the portamento,
That's right.
is done there's an analog portamento circuit, just like there was in the older Oberheims. But as an experiment, the analog portamento was turned off, and we did the portamento, the smooth movement of oscillator voltage in software. And that started the path of what led to the OB-8, which has, I believe, like less than half the number of trimmers.
So you learned something from.
We learned something.
Now we're at the OB-8.
And
a quick thought for you. What would happen if you actually learned to think like a synth? You'll quickly edit presets to get the sound you need. You'll be able to make the sounds you're hearing in your head from scratch. You'll create your own sounds that will elevate your music and make it stand out. You'll be able to confidently program almost any synth. And you'll expand your sound palette for all your projects. All of this and more is in my course, Think Like a Synth. My goal is to show you everything I've learned in my career, every technique, tip, and insight in an affordable, fun, hands-on synth course that you can immediately apply to your music. As you progress, you'll develop the unwavering confidence to know what every knob does before you turn it, which will empower you to create any sound in your imagination and set your music apart. Get a free lesson at anthonymarinellimusic.com and start creating legendary sounds for your music.
with the OB-8, we have an even more versatile bend box, and as many people know, we added a ton of features on what's called page 2. All of that came about because we realized, well, why don't we make the bend box digital? If the LFO's in software, if the processor's scanning the levers, then we can calibrate all this stuff basically in software. So suddenly we went from 8 trimmers down here to no trimmers.
2.
Sorry, thank you. I'm gonna say it again. 8 trimmers down here to 2 trimmers here.
You could have said that to me, and I'd be,
I know.
yeah, sure.
2 trimmers here
But
just to
2
center
really
the
great
levers.
trimmers, yeah.
And
Which is
the
super
software,
important.
the software helps you adjust those. Later, we went to having no trimmers for the levers because we realized, again, we can make the software even smarter. It can sense where the position is when they're not moving and know, well, that must be the center. So,
But that's the 70s moving into the 80s.
yeah, this would be really
Microcosm of it, right?
I mean,
here.
it's the same microprocessor in the OB-8 as the OB-Xa. So the OB-8 was 2 things where I think were quite remarkable for its time. The retail price of an OB-Xa 8-voice was $6,195 in 1981.
Really expensive.
What would you guess that would be in today's
Unbelievable.
dollars?
I mean,
like
buying a
triple.
vintage OB, you could buy an authentic vintage OB-Xa that Rob has made pristine today, and in today's dollars, that's still less expensive.
Yeah,
That's right.
Than what a new one cost you in 1981.
Well, a lot of synths are.
That's true. That's true.
A lot of the vintage, yeah.
The OB-8 added a ton of capabilities, but we got rid of the individual voice cards, made them individual voice boards. It was a real concerted effort to make something that was going to be unbelievably reliable and accurate, add a bunch of features, and be much lower cost. So this retailed for $1,800 less than the OB-Xa.
Wow.
By making things digital.
By instead of having individual circuit boards, we removed trimmers, we removed the amount of time it took to calibrate, and made voice boards that had 4 voices all on one board, which made it more reliable, less connectors, and made all of the portamento and LFOs and bend box all in software. The envelopes were still in hardware. The processor wasn't fast enough to do those yet. That was coming later. So this was $43.95 retail. Of course, you also remember back then, no one paid retail back then. So that was the price where you started negotiating with the music store at, right? So that was really a great breakthrough, I think. And arguably, the OB-8 to this day is probably one of the most reliable synthesizers of that era.
Certainly.
So,
and it can't be understated just how much you and Michelle juiced out of the Z80 on this thing.
Yeah.
the Z80, you want to tell us?
I don't think I'm qualified to talk about what a Z80 is.
Z80, Dave Smith, actually Dave Rossum of EMU was the very first person to use a microprocessor in a musical instrument, and it was for his polyphonic keyboard for the EMU modular synthesizers. And that was in the 1976 or so, 75, 76. Dave Smith was the first to put a processor in a polyphonic synth, the Prophet 5, obviously. The Z80, it was for a company called Zilog, and it was the hot stuff of microprocessors, a simple little 8-bit microprocessor, but it was, anybody could program this if you bothered to learn.
It allowed for memory, basically, right? So you didn't have to be a programmer on the gig.
So
think
much
of it
more
this
to memory.
way. It's, it's the notion of, I think of like a traditional car where you literally had, mechanical linkage of everything you do to those things, to a car where you're more driving by wire and there's a processor in between. That in between is the critical thing. That's why the programmer of a 4-voice, which has no processor, was technically the first programmable synthesizer, but it couldn't program every parameter because it was just really difficult to do. So think of it this way. Once the microprocessor was involved, and Dave Smith was the first to do it, with the Prophet 5, he disconnected the keyboard, every switch, every knob. It's all disconnected from the synthesizer. All of that is being read by a microprocessor. And then the microprocessor decides how to control the synthesizer. So you think about it, in an old synth, if I grab a filter knob, I'm literally turning up the voltage to the filter, and there's nothing intelligent about it. That's just what it does, right? It's
just voltage.
It's just voltage, right? It's like the difference of an old dimmer on a light in your house. You would just turn up the voltage. Nowadays, if you've got a smart home, you might still have what looks like a dimmer or up-down button, but those buttons aren't actually controlling the light. A microprocessor is seeing the buttons are pressed and deciding what to do.
They're telling the number or the value for the microprocessor to send out.
Right, so the Z80 is looking at the position of every knob, the position of every switch. It's deciding what lights to light up. It's deciding what to tell the voices to do anytime the
That's
key
more
is
so here,
pressed.
though, right?
Actually, since the Prophet 5.
Oh, so you have those characteristics in some of these earlier OB series.
No, here's the difference. So I'd say OB-X, Prophet 5, all of these Oberheims, they all share that basic concept of everything the human touches is read by the microprocessor. And the microprocessor decides what to tell the synthesizer to do. How it evolved is in the early days, like Prophet 5, OB-X, OB-Xa, every synthesizer function was still in hardware, and the processor was just giving a control voltage through a DAC or whatever to control things. Starting with first the portamento and the OB-Xa, and then the LFOs and so on in the OB-8, and other instruments like Chroma, the Prophet 600, and so on. The designers, we all started realizing if we would actually have the processor change the control voltage. I mean, think about it, right? If when you play a note, if 0 volts is my bottom C, if I play this note, I'm going to send 2 volts to an oscillator at a volt per octave. So the processor just puts out at the DAC 2 volts. If I want this to do vibrato, well, in analog, I can combine it with an LFO that's going voltage up and down. That's what you do on an ARP 2600. But if you're using software control, we can write a program that's going to add and subtract a voltage on that same line. So that's how the LFO hardware goes away, and ultimately the envelopes go away. Basically, everything that doesn't make a sound, but is just controlling the sound, moved more and more into software.
Which is ultimately kind of a good thing. I mean, like on the XA, that's like a perfect example of like kind of having it almost half and half, whereas like the bend box goes around the CPU.
Right.
So
the CPU does, the processor
you can throw off
doesn't
the
even know.
auto tune just by moving the pitch bender while it's tuning.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's kind of half and half. So the OB-8 was the first time where sound, now everything is disconnected from the synth. So that's kind of how things were evolving.
And this was in the middle. Where did this one appear in the history of the OBs?
The lore, so the OB-SX had just come out when I got there. My understanding of it,
This one down here.
it's kind of funny, is there was always this lore at Oberheim how even back to the 4-voice, they would get stuff in for repair, or even when the OB-X would come in for repair, and it's like no one had touched a knob. There would be, people were just using the factory presets, and there's a fair amount of expense into all the metal and knobs and so on. So the notion was, why not just make more of a preset synth? It's the same basic voice. It's actually, technically, this would be the first of the Oberheim synths to use the Curtis chip. So although it looked originally kind of in the OB-X style, it later changed to blue stripes. It was the first that had a similar voice architecture to the OB-Xa.
That's right.
But it was presets that were programmed on an OB-X and stored into EEPROMs. And then we just had a handful of knobs that you could edit, but you couldn't even store what you edited.
But you could send your WAV file or your tape dump from an X to Oberheim, and they would send you back an EEPROM for DSX.
Believe it or not many people did that, but that fear of, well, we're making it so you can't program it yourself. Someone might want to make their own sounds. So yeah, we did make it. If you had an OB-X, you could make sounds that you could put into the OB-SX. And this was famously used a lot by Prince and others, where they found presets that they liked. I think, is it A5? Nope. Darn it. C5, there we go. I only have 4 voices working, so I can't play enough notes.
That's the exact preset, right?
Right.
I believe that's also what they used on Jungle Love.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff.
Did you make that?
That preset? No, that was before my time. I believe that's probably the same. Let's see if it's,
There it is.
right? That's the sound,
So these series of synthesizers were the next evolution from the original, like 2-voice, 4-voice, and 8-voice, which we'll come back to. But in terms of the sound of them, there's the OB-X, the OB-Xa, and then the OB-8.
Yeah.
Right? The sound changed.
There's a lot of lore about that. So the OB-X.
Well, that's what I want to know about.
Yeah.
Now my interest is very piqued.
The OB-X, you have to remember, Thomas talked about this. It's really an amazing story. Again, before I was at Oberheim, the OB-X was a synth of necessity. The 4-voice and 8-voice were king of the hill. I mean, any great artist was using them. It was just amazing sounding synthesizers in the 70s.
Still are.
And still are. Yes, that's true. And so they're just humming along. Everything's fine. And then Dave Smith shows up with the Prophet 5. And that was a real game changer, right? So you can imagine 1978, suddenly Oberheim's sales just plummeted because Prophet 5, it's like, boy, talk about having a great tool, right? You know?
I had to have one immediately.
Yeah, yes. It's just really remarkable what Dave did. So Jim and Tom were like, crap, what do we do? If we can't come up with something, we're going to be out of business. So they'd never worked with a microprocessor before. So what would be the fastest way to design a microprocessor-controlled synthesizer? Well, you take exactly the voice of a SEM, right? They spent very little time.
Was it 6 months?
Working on the synthesizer design. I think they say 6, 7 months, because they basically said, okay, let's make a voice card that's essentially an SEM. Same oscillators, same filter, but we're just going to do the low pass, right? We're going to get rid of, we got to save a little cost to get rid of that stuff, right? We've already used Curtis chips for envelopes in the programmer. That was the very first Curtis chips ever made. So a little newer version of that. We've got some envelope chips. You know, it was very much an SEM. And in fact, there's certainly two-pole low-pass sounds, resonant sounds you do on an OB-Xa sounds like a 4-voice.
It's exactly the same.
It's the same voice. And all the effort was spent on how do we program a Z80 and make all this and come up with a control panel and boom, boom, boom. They showed this at Summer NAMM 1979, and you know, it was do or die. It was, you know, that was going to determine the future of Oberheim, and they wrote a lot of orders, and it was like, whew, okay, we're still in business.
Okay, but that's not folklore. I mean, it sounds like the sounds.
That's exactly right. So in terms of how the sound changed, it's like when it comes to two-pole low-pass sounds, you should be able to get any sound on an OB-Xa that you do on a 4-voice. And if it was like you had recordings of both of them, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So it makes sense why the 4-voice and the OB-Xa sound so similar, right? It's really basically the same voice. So then, as I mentioned, the OB-SX, but this time, you know, Doug Curtis had made the envelope chips, the 3310s. They were in getting used by a lot of people. And then he made oscillator and filter chips, the 3340 and 3320. And this was a pretty big breakthrough. I mean, it was still analog oscillators, analog filters, but they were more reliable. You could build them more easily. You could troubleshoot them more easily. So there wasn't a conscious effort at the time to like make the synth sound different. In fact, I believe the intent was it's just going to sound the same, right? You just think, well, it's a two-pole filter. Or you're right, it's an oscillator. It's a sawtooth wave, it just all sounds the same.
They weren't thinking about the magic and the lore like we do today.
Exactly right.
At all.
So, you know, you think about it, you could create your own presets for an OB-SX on an OB-X, but the voice in the OB-SX was Curtis chips. So it's really not the same voice. It was designed to be close enough.
But why did they change it?
It was a newer technology.
Because of what you said, they weren't thinking about that.
It'd be more reliable, more affordable.
Less trimmers.
Less trimmers,
hopefully.
Yes.
Then the OB-Xa is not a difficult one to maintain, is it?
It certainly is. It has a lot of the same challenges as the OB-Xa.
Yeah. The OB-Xa just made it worse.
The OB-Xa kind of did just make it worse, but what's interesting is, you know, and kind of jumping too far ahead here with the OB-8, is that when you have that in the same filter setting, the two-pole low pass, they do sound pretty damn close.
The Curtis chip is a 4-pole filter, and so it was kind of special design to make a 2-pole circuit from that. That was intended to sound as similar as the state variable 2-pole low pass of the other Oberheim. But it's interesting, for all the lore of how people think it sounds different, because the OB-SX looks like an OB-X, there's people that will tell you, oh, buy an OB-SX because you're going to get the OB-X voice, and some think that's going to be the best sounding voice. When in fact, you're not. There never was an OB-SX made with the original SEM filters and oscillators.
Just the OB-X.
Only the OB-X. So then it evolved to the OB-Xa, and here we added 4-pole filters. The Curtis chip already had a 4-pole. Jim Cooper actually started doing mods on OB-Xs to add the 4-pole because some people liked the 4-pole sound because that was a sound too. That's what was, you know, it's mini Moogs and Prophets and so on. Mm-hmm. So that added more chips. For reasons I can't explain, the OB-Xa actually has 2 Curtis filters per voice.
That's right.
One for 2-pole mode, one for 4-pole mode. they never get used at the same time. It's so sad because the money got spent to have 16 filter chips in an OB-Xa. You only get to use one at a time. So that was one of the changes we made when we went to the OB-8.
And they all need to be calibrated independently.
Yes, yeah, you had to tune each filter.
Yeah, you got to match them.
So on the OB-8, we
Crazy.
said, let's just put in one Curtis chip filter, and let's switch the circuitry around it to make it 2-pole or 4-pole. So with the exception of that change, the voice really in the OB-8 and the OB-Xa are identical. You can, if the OB-Xa is perfectly calibrated, there's no reason you can't make them sound exactly the same.
These two.
The thing that happened is, the OB-8 is when we really got good about tuning, where the microprocessor is tuning all the tracking and all the oscillators and everything. Arguably, we got too good at tuning. So people, even in the early days, started saying, well, the OB-8 sounds more clinical. It doesn't, we've changed the voice. And we'd have to prove to people, it's like, look at the voice. The schematic, it's the same. It's the same voice. So that's when we realized we had to add a voice detune feature to the OB-8. Because if the OB-8's calibrated and tuned, you go into unison, it doesn't sound very fat because if every oscillator is exactly in tune.
Right. Every string player is perfectly in tune, like canceling each other almost.
It doesn't quite work. So honestly, I think that's the biggest difference with the OB-8. I don't, in my opinion, I wouldn't buy an OB-Xa for its sound, because if you know what you're doing, you should be able to get that sound and have a lot more reliability with an OB-8. That's an opinion.
Wow.
I will agree it's more reliable. I will say they do sound different, though.
Well,
the output stage is different between the two. Some would say the OB-8 has somewhat of a natural high pass.
Well, what's interesting is there were two different versions of output stage of the OB-8.
That's right. There's a 3360 and the other.
Right, and and the 3080 version and the 3360 version.
Which I think the 3080...
3080 was the later one. I think we designed out the Curtis VCA.
But, yeah, because there's the Curtis VCA in the voice, and then the 3080 in the output.
Right.
And then that reversed later.
Right.
With 3080 in the voice, 3360 in the output, which is when people started saying it started to sound thinner, which is also a reason why we specify to people when they're getting an earlier OB-8.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my personal opinion is, anyone should use any tool that inspires them. If you're all in the box and doing plugins, great. There's nothing wrong with that. Do whatever works for you. I do think the difference between each of these old analog synths by themselves, like just two OB-Xas in the room, two Mini-Moogs in the room, certainly, whatever. It's just like you're picking up multiple guitars. You could take the same guitar and a guitar player is going to go like, oh, this one. This is the right one. Of
course.
So it makes sense. So you just go and find what works for you. So sometimes the difference that someone might think between an OB-8 and OB-Xa is because of an actual difference, and sometimes it might be because of that particular one that they're playing.
Yeah, because one's probably broken sometimes.
Sometimes it's broken.
To be honest.
Yeah. Taking away the flexibility of the OB-Xa and the OB-8, the OB-X delivers the sound of the SEMs, of the four voice,
no question about it, no question. And that's why, not to jump ahead, but when we designed the OB-X8, which was the modern homage to all this, we put in exactly the state variable SEM filter.
Exactly?
It's the exact circuit.
So the newest one is full circle back to the OB-X?
The newest one has every sound of all four of these. You can even load cassette tapes if you made a cassette tape in 1983 of an OB-8, you can load those presets into an OB-X8. And so it's got all the factory sounds, everything, and I even did some videos online to show and compare the presets. Because what was critical is the reason these are so revered is because of their analog circuitry. So it's 100% analog signal path with the same components. There's a Curtis chip filter and the SEM filter in an OB-X8. That's the irony. We're back to having two filters, but you only get to use one at a time.
Yeah, we came back to the sound. Back home.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm super excited to let you know that I have a Patreon where you can get exclusive videos and interactive live streams. So click the link in the description for more information, and let's get back to the video.
So although the the OB-Xa was the first synth I was involved in. As I mentioned, it was already well in development, and I got to kind of put my fingerprints on it. But the first project that Tom basically gave me free rein was the DSX, which I started in 1980. I was still 19, and it became another really great life lesson because, first of all, I'd love sequencers. You know, I'd put a little Pi sequencer in my 2600, and the notion of doing a digital sequencer just sounded really exciting. Tom and Jim had designed in a parallel interface into the OB-Xa, and in fact, it was a retrofit to put it in the OB-X. It was a 37-pin connector, and it's basically the entire data and address bus of the Z80 microprocessor. Because they didn't know what you might want to do with it, but it was a way to expand it. So literally what can happen is an external device can take over the processor in the synthesizer, can actually stop it, and it can read and write the synthesizer's memory, do whatever it wants. So it's kind of a free-for-all. It's like there's no protocols, nothing. It's basically just, you know, stop the processor for a fraction of a second, change a bunch of memory, and then let it go on again. The OB-Xa or OB, they don't even know what's going on. In fact, how the sequencer works is the sequencer stops it and puts into memory that some keys were pressed. And when it wakes up, the OB-Xa says, oh, these keys were pressed. It doesn't care that you weren't actually pressing them. You know, it's this little alternate universe. So the DSX can take over the brain of the OB-Xa or OB-8 to play sequences. So I thought, well, it's a digital sequencer, right? It can do anything we want. So I drew up, and I still have actually my original spec that I wrote up without even thinking. In fact, to be more honest, it's like it didn't even occur to me what it might take or what I might have to do to actually make it. I just wrote the spec of what I wanted. It's like, well, I need multi-track. I want to be able to real-time turn tracks off and on. I want to real-time transpose tracks. I want to be able to quantize, which was not a thing in sequencers. They'd started showing up. I mean, you know, Roger Lynn's drum machine was really the first performance instrument that you could quantize in real time. I mean, obviously, everything was quantized.
I was
step
doing
sequence.
drums on the synclavier, though, that were quantized.
There you go. But step sequencing, like if you used an MPC, anything that was step sequence was automatically quantized.
Yeah.
But this was no, it's just like, I'm just going to play in real time, and it's going to correct
Yeah, that's what I'm
the
talking
timing.
about. Play the notes on the
Oh, you can do
keyboard.
that on a synclavier?
Yeah, and then you can quantize
Yeah, I
it.
didn't know that. Oh, that's cool. So
Then the Lin came around. I got a Lin drum in '83, but that was the Lin drum. I don't know if the LM1.
the LM1 was the
counted.
first, the LM1 came out in 80, I believe.
So same as the synclavier. They were the first two quantizers.
Probably so. So I wanted quantizing. I wanted to synchronize. We were thinking about doing a drum machine. I wanted to synchronize it. Basically came up with the concept of what we eventually called the Oberheim system. Having a sequencer, a drum machine, a synthesizer, they all work together.
This is before MIDI was ever a thought.
Yeah, there wasn't MIDI yet. So you had to design your own custom thing. So I drew up this whole thing, and Tom says, great. I told him, I got to have a display. Displays weren't on things back then, on these types of products. So we found this. I think it cost us like $50 to put in these 16 characters of display.
This was a lot of money back then.
In fact, the first ads for the sequencer drum machine, the first ads you'll see, there's like a little inset picture of each of the displays. It was like a selling feature. It's like, it's got actual displays. Sounds crazy. So I tried the whole thing up. Tom's like, great, go design it. And that was an interesting moment because I think, well, okay, well, it's got a processor. We'll use a Z80. That's what we use. Start laying out, blah, 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 start writing code. And writing code back then, this will be a real dinosaur moment of, or kind of like the old man talking about walking uphill both ways to school. To write code at Oberheim, we had a GA, it was general automation mini computer with 8-inch floppies and a little Sorok terminal and a very simple text editor. And you could write assembly code for Z80 on this, and it had what's called a cross assembler. It would create the machine code. So you'd writing in assembly code, which assembly code in a microprocessor is basically each and everything that happens, you have to specify, right? And nothing happens by itself. You know, it's like we all work in a higher level language. If I asked you to raise your hand, you'd raise your hand, right? That's a higher level language. If you imagine your brain, you have to spell out each change of every muscle and nerve ending and everything that's happening. That's what assembly language is. It's very detailed. So to write a sequencer, you're writing in this assembly language is pretty archaic. And then we'd assemble the code, and then we'd send it over a serial port to an S100 bus computer that had an EEPROM burner. And then you could burn it in an EEPROM, and then you put it in your prototype hardware and you'd turn it on. And if your code did something that made sense, great. If it just bricked, all you could do is go back and look at your source code and try to figure out what you did wrong.
And it's not like modern day where it says like, this at this line, it crashed. It's like you gotta figure it out.
There's no feedback. There's no tracing. There's no debugging. There's no anything. You just have to write it. So I started writing code and I realized, well, okay, I got to write each like basic thing and test things out. And it was a long process. And I got to a point where, quite frankly, I was definitely in over my head. And again, like I said, I'm 19 years old, and that's my first real job. And I actually thought to myself several times what the kids today would call ghosting. It really occurred to me driving to work every day. It's like, I think one day I might have to just not show up and just disappear, because it was like I was mortified at the thought of telling Tom and everyone that I'm stuck and that I'm in over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. I couldn't imagine doing that, but I thought I'm not going to be able to finish it. I should just disappear. Somehow each day it's like, one more day. I'm going to give it another try. Going to keep going. And obviously, eventually I got through. I figured out my bugs. I got it to a place where it actually worked. And that lesson has stuck with me through my whole career, because there hasn't been a product I've ever worked on that didn't have, frankly put, that oh shit moment where it's like, this doesn't work. What are we going to do? I'm not even sure what's going on. Mm-hmm. And you just realize it's like, it's all about having the tenacity and the perseverance to push through that. So in 1981, we finished the sequencer. The drum machine followed not long afterwards.
So this technology was able to carry somewhat forward?
Simple clock, yeah, the same processor. My main work on the DMX was more about how they synchronized. One of the things I contributed to the DMX is I am one of the 4 people clapping on the hand claps.
That's wow.
So that was, I get to say that I've been on really a lot of records.
That's really doing the hand claps.
A lot of records.
A lot of records, but
Well, if you don't mind me asking, can you tell me about one specific thing in the DSX where you were like, shit, this is not working, and then what actually made it work?
So what would happen is, so think about the fact that you're working in assembly language meant, let's say you had to do something like something as basic as 16-bit math. You just need to add 2 numbers together. Mm-hmm. It's an 8-bit processor. So you can't add 2 16-bit numbers. You add 2 8-bit numbers, and you take the carry, and then you add it to the most significant byte, and so on, right? It's simple as idea, right? But it's sort of several instructions, right?
Okay.
It's when you have nothing checking what you do, you could type anything you want. You could make a simple mistake, like you want to add 5. If you want to add 5 to a number, well, if it was an absolute number, you had to put a pound sign. You'd say add 5 with a pound, meaning I want to add that actual number. If you forgot the pound sign, that means I want to add what's in memory location number 5. Completely different outcome, right? But what problem might happen if you did that might be really subtle. So I had problems where, like, if your sequence was exactly this number of notes long, or if you quantized in exactly this way, if you did something that I could have one of these simple little errors, which was really essentially like a typo. Mm-hmm. It wasn't what I meant to do, mm-hmm. right? My thought was correct. But the problem was how elusive it was to find, because it'd be so rare that it would show up, right? So that was that was really the toughest part, is just finding those bugs. And it didn't end. I mean, when we shipped, it was certainly not bug free. There would be, sometimes an artist or whatever they're using, they're saying, I did this. So, I mean, by the time we finished, we were version 3 point something. I did a number of software updates. You had to change the EEPROMs to do the updates because someone would find another bug. The bugs got more and more obscure, typically.
Of course.
As time went on.
Now, I own about 6 of them. I've never really used them.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Never really used them. The only person I know who uses them regularly is our friend Steve Porcaro.
Steve, good old Steve. What I love about Steve is I feel like everything that I worked on that he used it more completely than anybody else.
Yeah.
So, remember Steve was early into sequencers. So he was big into Oberheim sequencers. The Oberheim DS2 way up there at the top, of which actually that one is Steve's.
I was just going to say, I have a feeling it's in this room.
One of his I have
the other one.
I fixed it one time and then it stopped working again, so I've got to deal with that. He was using that in really creative ways, and when he saw the DSX, he right away, one of the things he loves to do is being able to hit the play button. Again, I just thought it was useful as a performance feature that if you could hit play while a sequence is already playing, it immediately started at the beginning again. Mm-hmm. So you could actually use that musically, and if you had like some little fast riff going, you could restart it, and so I think Steve would usually do it like that, right? Yep. It was amazing. He got totally into it.
But there's a speaker inside of it.
For the metronome.
That's the metronome.
If I wanted to quantize something to 16th notes, you got to have a time base. You got to know what to play. There wasn't some way to send a click out to something else. So I put a click out jack and I put a little speaker in there that just goes.
Yeah,
You set your tempo and you could listen to the little speaker. And if you needed it louder, you could patch it out to your.
Okay, so
speakers.
there is an audio output for it.
Yes.
Okay,
I think so. It's a long time ago.
So we're climbing up the ladder.
Okay.
And I did do a ton of sessions with Keith LeBlanc. Do you know Keith?
Sounds familiar.
He was Sugar Hill Gang. Like he did a lot of the Tommy Boy stuff.
Yeah.
And I was a Tommy Boy artist for a little bit, believe it or not. And I did some sessions there. But this was the drum machine of choice for Keith LeBlanc and Tommy Boy. And check out, Malcolm X, No Sellout. Some of the most classic drum beats. Like in this thing, there's nothing like the tom sounds on this drum machine, I think.
This is the second generation toms. So these are the first DMX. The toms and the cymbals were all half as long as these are. That changed fairly early on. There's multiple versions.
Yeah, and the claps.
The claps changed too. I'm only on the first generation claps.
Well, I don't really know the difference, but I mean.
But you know that sound. I could give you one more funny DMX story.
Okay.
So there was a small group. We're gonna let you know, big secret. Small group of people that knew this secret gesture in the Oberheim world. And that was, if someone told a bad joke, you would go like this. And everyone's like, why are you guys doing that? Of course, so the insiders would all laugh. It's like, yeah, you told a bad joke. Well, that gesture is index finger across the snare.
Oh, but
And kick and crash. Take my wife, please.
Wait, you got to get in there.
That is hysterical.
So that was
the 1980s but
That might be even cooler than the Hello Mom, the Hi Mom page, which I'm certain we'll get to.
I want to take a second to remind you to like and subscribe, leave a comment, and ring the bell so you don't miss any future videos. And go to AnthonyMarinelliMusic.com to find exclusive free content and more. And thank you for all your amazing support. Let's get back to this video.
the good stuff here. This was the pinnacle of the Oberheim era of the 80s. I mean, frankly, that era came to an end, not because I left, but because the company changed. It went bankrupt in 1985, and that was really the end of an era. But the last, the flagships that we did was a wonderful collaboration with Michel Douadic, myself, Tom, and Doug Curtis, the Curtis Chips. there were some other software engineers who worked on this stuff, including Ann Graham and Jim Letts and Alex Silverman, who are all in the Hi Mom page, which we can show you. But basically, the OB-8 is when we realized we'd reached kind of the maximum we could squeeze out of a Z80 processor. We actually attempted to squeeze a little more. We made an expander. Actually, first probably worth a mention of why we wanted an expander. Remember, the DSX had 8 control voltage and gate outs. It was designed before MIDI existed. We wanted to make a synthesizer expander module that could utilize those CV and gates so you could add more voices, because this became an important songwriting tool. So we made a 4-voice version of the OB-8. It was actually before the OB-8 came out, between the OB-Xa and OB-8.
Oh, interesting.
And we called it the OB-Xpander, and it had the blue stripes and no keyboard, and it was 4-voice multi-timbre.
I've seen that.
And only one of those exists, and it's at EMEAP, this great synthesizer museum, because I had it in storage forever, and I actually got it working again and gave it to them. So, but that synthesizer, doing 4 independent voices and the muxing of the sample and holds with that one Z80, things like the LFOs and stuff just got too slow. It was just sluggish, the response time. We thought, we're stuck. We got a band, basically this generation of control, we got to just start from scratch, basically. So we found a different processor, which became popular in some other synths, the 6809. We decided we're going to dedicate a processor just to 6 voices. So in an expander, there's a single large voice card with a single processor.
And it is large.
It is pretty large. It's a good sized board that's got vertically. You can see the 6 voices with Curtis chips, some new Curtis chips that gave us some new functionality and helped compress a bit the size, because there was a new oscillator that had 2 oscillators in one, and a filter that let us do the multi-mode filter approach we have here. Anyway, that one processor controlling it, and now all of the modulation was under the processor control. And why that was important is both Michelle and I, our dream was, how do we make a polyphonic synthesizer that's as versatile as a modular synthesizer? Because a modular synthesizer was the best playground. It just was typically monophonic. And so we wanted to be able to route anything to anything. And that required a new approach to the synthesizer design, hence the new microprocessor, and also required a new approach to the user interface, because you couldn't have one knob per function anymore. That'd just be way too big.
That would be an Oberheim 8-voice.
Yes, exactly. And an Oberheim 8-voice it's a good point. As amazing as that sound, it's one of the most limited synthesizers from a modulation standpoint.
Totally.
Right? Mm-hmm. It's like you can do frequency mod or pulse width mod.
That's right.
Not both, right? I mean, it's severely limited. It's like you can get away with severely limited when it sounds amazing. So here, the idea was, let's get rid of all of those limitations. How do we make it so you can modulate anything by anything? And I don't have to bore you with how it all works. We could do a whole tutorial of how that works. But coming up with this user interface was a big breakthrough. Us finding these displays that we could use.
Yeah, coming from, like you were saying, this was a big deal, this little
little 1x16 to having 3 separate 40-character alphanumeric displays.
Will, this little guy.
Yeah, that's 16 characters.
And then how many years later?
That shipped in 1981, this shipped in 1984. So 3 years later, now we've got 140 characters of vacuum fluorescent display. And the idea here was that you kind of have a window of a control panel into whatever section that you've selected. So the whole signal flow was put on the front panel, and if you select VCO1, now this section is VCO1, and all the knobs that you have on the panel are available here. If you want to change the frequency, if you want to change detune, pulse width, and volume, there it is. But then these buttons, if I want to modulate the volume of oscillator 1, I just press the button where it says volume, and now I can select if I wanted, for example, velocity to control the volume. I'd go like that. You can see my encoders are a little dirty. And now I have velocity modulating the volume.
Isn't this one of the
oscillator.
first instances of these like forever turning pots too? It's like one of the
think
first time
so.
I've seen them where you just, hey, they just keep going.
It might be. I don't remember.
I don't
It
know
was
where
certainly
they
the first
started.
time we'd used it.
It's also
You know-
very much in the spirit of Oberheim when you consider that on the older ones, you turn a knob and it doesn't jump to the knob position. So the encoders kind of keeps that going in a weird way.
Right. That was something. It's a philosophical difference in terms of synthesizer design. From a performance standpoint, I've always hated parameters or synths where the knob jumps to the position when you turn it, because you cannot use any of the knobs in performance. So to me, it's really important that you are able to. You need to be able to, wherever the filter is. I just want it brighter. If the filter's real mellow on a synth where it jumps and the knob was all the way up, all of a sudden, bam, it's just really bright. And so
With the Prophet though, you got to reset it.
that's
You turn the volume down and then you
That's
reset
exactly.
it. And that's my
that would be
that
one
was
of
my fix.
That was one of the disagreements Dave and I had, and why it was important to retain that capability in the OB-Xa. You can have that relative mode
Yeah.
of the knobs, but you can change it to jump mode, as we call it, if that's what you prefer. So remember, in this era, we were developing this when the DX7 came out. So the DX7 was like the first synth where it was the menu dive, one parameter at
Yep.
a time.
Yeah.
Now, its sound was undeniable, right? That's why it was so popular. But it was also giving a lot of synth designers permission to go, oh, great, we could just make one parameter at a time. And we just hated that. It was, and as a session guy, like you say, I hated that. And you got pretty good at going through it, but it was just so many operations. So here it was a conscious decision. It's only 6 parameters at a time, but it's much more than having 6 times the capability, because there really isn't any diving. You've got a direct button for each of the different choices you have, and you have a page 2 button, and you have a modulation button. That's the whole deal, right? So
Yeah, it's a pretty shallow hole.
yeah,
The DX7 was like a hole, like a really skinny hole that went really far down. Just really tough for me.
Yeah, so we really feel like we hit a great compromise here. And actually, one of my favorite Xpander stories, we had just finished it. And of course, I wanted to show it to Steve Porcaro. They were rehearsing for a Toto tour. I went down to the rehearsal studio and I set it up. And I probably explained it for about 5 minutes to Steve. And you can see someone with his experience and with the modular synths and everything. Once the light bulb went off, he just went crazy. He was like all over it. And the first preset that's in here on the factory units, it's called Toto Horns, because that's a preset that Steve and I wrote at that rehearsal.
Wow.
And
Let's hear it.
Yeah, let's hear it. We'll listen to it on the Matrix-12 here, if we're set up. Right? Tune it up an octave. A little aftertouch.
Nice.
And, what I like to say is people listening and going, okay, it's an analog synth. Sure, it's got a great analog sound, Oberheim sound and all that. But what makes an instrument like this special, in my opinion, is little things. Like if you hit a low note, you hear how the oscillators are beating fairly fast, right? It's pretty detuned. You typically can't detune that low, because if you detune it that much down there, once you get to the top of the keyboard, it's really out of tune.
Unbearable, yeah.
Right? It's unbearable. So you're going to have too much beating. Well, since you can modulate anything by anything, well, just send a little bit of negative keyboard modulation to your detuned oscillator.
Okay. So it's like,
Wow.
So now I'm beating, I can
That's
have,
programmed into this patch.
yeah, it's just programmed into the patch.
that you and
love
Steve
that.
came up with that when you were patching it?
Yeah, and the little bit of spit. Be able to go, well, how do we want to do that? Do you want it to do it as a little pitch bend? Should we have a little burst of noise modulation? So many choices of how you can do it. So for me, that's what makes the Xpander Matrix-12 special, is because there's subtle things in each sound, like using release velocity
Oh,
to have a little more
it
sustain.
almost felt like reverb.
Right. That's not reverb. Short release, long release.
Wow.
Release velocity.
Yeah, release velocity, here's a little soapbox. Release velocity is free from a designer standpoint. If you've developed a keyboard that can measure how fast a key goes down, it's free to measure how fast the key goes up. How many synths give you release velocity? It's very few.
Very few.
As a keyboard player, I can't understand why. I mean, everything I do has release velocity. And if no one uses it but me, I'm okay
I didn't
with
even
that.
know the Matrix-12 had that.
But, it's for doing little things like that, especially like a string patch, it just makes things more musical, So that's a little bit about the Matrix-12. So this was the last synth that I got a chance to complete. It's literally 2 expander boards and a keyboard. There's only 1 button difference between the two because you have to switch which 6 voices you're looking at. If anyone suggests that an expander or Matrix-12 sound different, they just need to look inside or ask Rob. It's literally the exact same voice board.
But maybe partly because the expander doesn't live with a keyboard. And the sound is really connected in some way to how you express. And now you have a keyboard that has like polyphonic aftertouch, right?
Well, no? Back then, this was only monophonic aftertouch.
So you have monophonic, okay, fine.
It will respond to polyphonic aftertouch if you have a keyboard because it was really the first true multi-timbral synthesizer that took advantage of MIDI, where you could put each voice on its own channel. You could do anything. That's why guitar synthesizer folks, Alan Holdsworth did several albums. He took a Matrix-12 and cut the keyboard off.
Wow.
Because he wanted 12 voices, to have 2 voices per string. And he played guitar synth like nobody. It was unbelievable what he could do with it. But you could have a different sound on each string. You could pitch bend each string. You could do controllers on each string independently.
Well, that's really a great story. So you really feel like it evolved to this. This was and then what's sitting on top?
So the Matrix 6, its motivation, that was the last user interface I designed. And I'll be honest to say I was reluctant. It was necessity again. Remember 1985, we had 84, 85. Expander and Matrix-12 were very popular, but digital was becoming more commonplace. More affordable synths were more commonplace. So there was a real drive to try to make a more affordable Oberheim. So this is, I think, much like maybe Dave Smith when he did the Prophet 600 and things like that. They're perfectly good synths, but it's just important to know their motivation. So it's to cut costs. So it has digital oscillators, analog filters, 6 voice. It still has a lot of modulation capabilities, but its user interface is much simpler. You're back to only 1 parameter at a time, which was not my favorite thing. And that's why there's this massive overlay, because I wanted to list everything you could do, so at least you could more quickly navigate, since we had so much panel space. I mean, the front panel board is just that tiny piece over there.
It's like having the user manual taped to the front.
Right. That was kind of the idea. So it's quite versatile. It sounds great. This synth voice is what evolved to the Matrix 1000, which kind of took a preset synth to its next extreme, right? Having 1,000 presets. Those became very popular and very affordable way of getting an Oberheim sound.
So then we have a big gap of time after this, to the point of what you did, a wonderful thing that you did by reviving this great legacy, right? Can you tell us what happened? Because then it really completes the whole story.
Yeah. So, Tom, I left Oberheim, it was about 5 weeks before they filed bankruptcy. I didn't know it was going to be going that fast, but I knew things were in trouble and it was just time for me to go. I parted on very good terms. New owners took over. Tom stayed for a little while, but pretty soon he left. And then I went on to do other things. He went on to do other things. He did Marion Systems, which was an analog synthesizer, very rare, that Tom designed. He did early digital recording products. C-Sound was the name of the company. And eventually he kind of left the industry and was doing other things until he was thankfully convinced by Roger Lynn and others to bring back the SEM And that was around 2009, I think. Now,
That's the 2-voice?
his...
Or the 4-voice? What
I think he
happened?
came out with an SEM first.
SEM,
right? The
oh,
SEM
that's
Pro,
a
just
single,
module.
Explain what that is.
So-
Now I know it's one of the modules that's in the original.
You're right. So this would be an original SEM with some extra holes drilled in it.
You want to get it close on that one? Because there are new versions of it that you'll see that are more MIDI friendly and that sort of thing.
The SEM is what was the first synthesizer voice. It was a synthesizer expander module. And it was because when you used an Oberheim sequencer on your Mini Moog or your 2600, you suddenly didn't have a synthesizer anymore. So let's have an extra voice so we can sequence and play. And of course, a 2-voice is just 2 of these, and a 4-voice is 4 of them, and the 8-voice is 8 of them. And that was kind of the foundation. And, basically, Tom was eventually convinced to bring this back. So he made a fully analog version of this synthesizer. It's the same basic controls. He added a patch panel, and there's a MIDI version. I may get some of the facts wrong. But in that era, that was kind of the resurgence of Tom.
2009.
I believe it was 2009. Now, at that time, the Oberheim brand, in 1985, Tom lost the right to use his name. Because people don't realize, it's like if you name your company after yourself, that's now a brand, that's a trademark. So the Oberheim trademark was owned by someone else. And by that time, it changed hands a few times, but it was owned by Gibson. So Tom came out with the SEM, but he couldn't call it Oberheim. In fact, he got some advice. Basically what he does, he put his signature on it because he can still use his full name. So it was signed Tom Oberheim, and he came out with these things. For me, I wasn't involved in any of that, but since they went out of business, it's always felt wrong and a shame that someone who's alive and so important in this industry isn't able to use his own name. So I first started attempting with Gibson in that era to see if because they weren't really using it, if they'd be willing to give it to Tom or let me buy it or something. And the management at that time was just not interested. And then, but then Gibson went bankrupt. Kind of some karma there, I suppose. And there was new leadership at Gibson. And that new leadership I approached in January of 2019. Let's see if I get the years right. Yes, 2019. And told them the whole story and asked them, I said, it's kind of funny. Gibson had just gone bankrupt. I said, you guys could do something really good for the industry and actually get some good press, which wouldn't be a bad thing in the current situation.
Because they were having issues with the Brazilian rosewood too.
They had a lot of issues with the previous generation of Gibson. So I said, why don't you give Tom his name back and we'll do a nice press release and everything. So by summer of 2019, Tom got his name back. The story got a little more complicated because by then, because Gibson hadn't used it, Behringer had registered the name in Europe and in other countries, which is legal.
A legal loophole, yeah.
Yeah, it was legal. If you abandon a trademark,
Yeah.
it's like the Simmons trademark exists today. It's not this. It's because
people can't just hoard names and
you can if you're not using a name.
That seems right.
Yeah, that's just so. There was nothing nefarious. It's just, but now it was complicated because different people own the name in different countries, so that's not very practical. So it took some coaxing and discussions, but eventually we convinced Behringer to also give the name back to Tom.
Well, good for Behringer too.
Yes,
Very
exactly.
positive.
Yes, they did the right thing. But the other wonderful thing that happened in bringing Oberheim back is that Dave Smith, once Tom was doing these expander modules, Dave Smith had this great Dave Smith had this great platform he developed for the Prophet 6, where it was the processor control. It's the same conceptual idea of these originals. Processor control is the main board, but the individual voices were on these voice cards.
Wonder where you got that idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. And so he talked with Tom. Tom really wanted to do a polyphonic synth, but he's thinking he's just one guy. How's he going to make that happen? So he and Dave started talking together, and they realized, well, we could make Oberheim voice cards in this and make a whole new user interface and actually have a real Oberheim polyphonic synth. And that's how the OB-Xa was born. But that's before Tom had the name back. So the OB-Xa is a sequential product that had Tom Oberheim's signature on it.
Oh, that explains it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because Tom didn't own his name.
But these two greats decided to work together.
They worked together, and they did a fantastic synth. And people still love the OB-Xa. It's amazing.
Totally.
So that's great, and that allowed Tom to be back in the synth business, and it was very generous of Dave. Dave paid Tom a royalty on the sales, and now that was a good thing for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So now it was kind of in parallel. I'd been working on getting the name back, and in parallel was talking to Tom and Dave about what would be next for Oberheim. What could we do? And it was in secret at the time, but Dave was working on the reissue of the Prophet 5, like bringing back a real authentic Prophet 5.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, should we bring back a real authentic Oberheim? So that's when I went deep down the rabbit hole. And even before we got the name back, because we knew, well, if we had to, it'll just be Tom's signature on it.
Right.
Into digging up the original software from the OB-8, which I still had on floppy disks, and reassessing all those schematics, and just from the ground up with the sequential team and with Dave and with Tom, we developed what became the OB-Xa, which there's one hiding over here. There's another one
Let's
set
get
up
up
in the
close
other
on this,
room.
because this is like today.
This is currently available. This launched in, you can cut out the long pause. What year would that have been? 2022 or 3?
I thought it must have been 3 or
23.
3, yeah.
So the idea behind the OB-Xa, and to Dave's credit, he allowed me to go a little crazy. You could easily have argued about tiny little details not being all that important today, but I was determined to have the OB-Xa be able to do 100% of everything that the originals did, down to the quirks, the exact 64 different speeds that an LFO of an OB-8 can do is exactly what this does.
And with the SEM sound?
With the original SEM filter design, with the Curtis chip 3340 for the OB-Xa and OB-8, with its discrete oscillators, just like in the original SEM.
Wait, so there's 2 different oscillators happening too?
No, not oscillator.
Okay.
Did I say 3340?
I think, yeah.
Damn it.
I think so.
3320. So it has the original SEM filter design. It has the SEM oscillators. It has the Curtis chip, the 3320, for the filters to do the OB-Xa and OB-8 filter modes. So there's 2 different 2-pole filters in there in analog, because the 2-pole in the OB-Xa and the 2-pole in the OB-X don't sound exactly the same.
Right.
For a lot of sounds, you can switch between the two and go, wow, the difference is really subtle. For certain sounds, it might be, okay, now I hear something more, but we wanted it to be in there. So every factory preset of every one of those synths is in here.
So is this the 3 of
That's
you
awesome.
that worked on this?
Oh, there was a bigger team than that. We had, pretty much the whole sequential team.
But the legends are
The legends.
Tom, Dave Smith,
Tom, Dave
and you.
Smith. Yeah. This was,
That's really amazing.
This is-
I do want to say, I know Tony Caravitas.
Tony Caravitas was a big deal in the hardware. There were
Total.
several
Give
great
credit to
legend.
I don't know
Such a
how
legend.
deep it
No,
goes.
there was a whole team. But I think, honestly, I'll tell you, the thing that makes me emotional about the OB-X8, I met Dave Smith in 1978 when he launched the Prophet 5. I would jokingly say I met him. He didn't meet me because he met thousands of people that show. But we got to know each other when I started at Oberheim and when we went to Japan to discuss what became MIDI and so on. And I'd known Dave for all these decades, but we'd always been competitors or just friends, never had worked together. And the OB-X8 was the first and only synthesizer where I got to work directly with Dave. And it was really a pleasure. And I feel that this definitely has Dave's fingerprints and Tom's and mine and Tony's and many others. But I feel it was really a privilege to be able to work with Dave. It's heartbreaking that it became the first and last thing for me to work with Dave, since he passed literally days before our NAMM launch of this product.
So sorry.
Yeah, it was that's a loss for all of us. But I'll tell you, his heart and soul and love for synthesizers all over this, and his ability, despite, I mean, there's no reason he even had to do this, right? His legacy is tremendous, and the sequential brand is so amazing. But he was willing to honor, this needs to be an Oberheim. There's things that are very different than how you would approach it if it was a Prophet.
Well, that's an extra special thing.
Yeah,
but it took,
it is.
like, I don't know why any of these synth designers had to do this, because there had to be so much inertia. It was so much heart, and just that what if that they just couldn't get out of their head. Because it was like hard to make. How do you make a company like this survive? Like all of these companies, all of them.
Yeah.
Like Sequential, Moog, Oberheim.
Every one of them's gone out of business.
Yeah, all the American ones, because they
all went out of business.
It didn't have the giant corporate structure like some vertical conglomerate that can just figure it out.
And that's actually one of the things that's so wonderful, how all this connected. It was quite serendipitous, because we started talking with Dave about what is the future of his company. It turned 70. His kids weren't going to take over the business. Where did this go? And he still had this passion for designing synthesizers and wanted to for many years, but he wasn't that fond of running a company. In fact, if you recall, when Dave got back into the business, for a long time, he was like, I'm a one-person company, and he was killing it. He was doing all this great stuff. But, it was natural that he grew, and he got a great team put together. And since he knew that Sue and I had successfully sold our company, that was Line 6, and we'd helped some other people with transactions, he just asked our advice, and we told him how it can be fantastic. You really just have to find the right partner, and we helped him in finding the partner, which was Focusrite, which is another company of amazingly passionate people. It's not corporate. It's people who want to make really great products. They had great love and respect for sequential. So we helped Focusrite by sequential. And what that means for the musician, when it's done right, when it's a good marriage like that, is sequential is never going to go away, right? Because you got the security of a bigger company, but that bigger company is going, just be sequential, do your thing. And you can see with what they've done, they just keep being sequential. And that when that happened, we were already working on this product. We'd already started, it was at very early stages. And so like, fine, go on and do that too. And then it's just very good fortune that before this shipped, and I tell you, it was actually really shortly before we announced the product, we formally got the Oberheim name back, and we're able to put that amazing logo, that great
celebration,
and, huge Oberheim on the back of that. That was a great source of pride to be able to say, no, this is Oberheim. It's the first real Oberheim in 40 years.
What a massive thank you gave to those guys and to all of us. Like that you could come in from a musical point of view, some kid that just wanted to be a musician, and bring this like musical features to an instrument, and then get in there and design software on all these instruments that we talked about, from the OB-Xa to the sequencer, and it integrated into the drum machine, and all the way up through these expressive instruments with all this control, and then to culminate it all, to help them with the business. Because without that, it's over.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you brought it back. I mean, it's kind of like giving me this feeling, and the name, and the two giants coming together and working together, and just the spirit of all of it. We're fortunate to know you, and that you still have the passion.
Thanks.
They are also fortunate to know.
Yeah, you're still driving. So, I mean,
a lot of stuff just happened to go right, and it is wonderful. You can imagine for me, Tom gave me my first job, right? This kid who didn't even know if he wanted to have a real job. So I owe so much to Tom. I learned that was 5 years of school I wouldn't trade for anything in the 80s. And for it to have worked out, to be able to come full circle, and for Tom to be, in his late 80s, to be getting the accolades he deserves, and for people to really realize what an impact he had on the business, and to connect that with Dave's legacy, that's just been, I feel really lucky. It's been
and the
pleasure.
Value beyond money that you feel, knowing, you're just smiling.
Yeah.
I can feel it from you.
That was
putting it all
the
together.
Motivation. It's probably the first time since the 80s that I got to almost feel blindly just motivated just by the passion of making a great product. Because obviously in the 80s, we didn't know much about business. That's why Oberheim went out of business the first time. But we had the love of the synthesizers and wanted to just make great products. And we just put all that into this.
What's your favorite Oberheim synth?
The Matrix-12.
Oh, you didn't have a problem saying it.
No, I didn't. That one is, I have the most fun. I mean, from a practical standpoint, if I was gigging or doing sessions or whatever, it'd be the OB-Xa all day long. Because I know I'd never have to worry about it breaking
The new
down.
one.
The newest one, yeah. Because I can get all the OB sounds.
But just when you...
I can get some of that. If I just want to noodle, and if
Yeah.
I'm going to make a sound from scratch and just go, where's my mind going to take me? It's going to be the Matrix-12.
Yeah, when you just come in alone and you're just like,
Yeah.
you want to
Yeah.
open up all the little brain cells, and
Yeah.
that's what it feels like to me when I go on a Moog modular.
That's
And
right.
I just do that, and because I
that's
literally
what
make
happened.
the connections, and because it works for me in that way. So,
Yeah.
wow, that was good. Okay, well, we'll end with a couple more quick things. I wrote down a couple things, but
Okay.
where's my? Wait, I have a
Chuck-
lightning round for you.
Lightning round.
This is really fast.
Okay, all right.
Whatever this means to you, analog versus digital, and you can chime in too.
I will not be chiming in when I'm in the same room as this guy.
Well, that's chiming in
I'm-
right there.
People are surprised, and I say I'm technology agnostic. Whatever inspires you in that moment, it should be, that's what matters. If you're just caught up in what the technology is, what's the point? It just so happens that analog synths sound amazing, and some digital synths sound amazing, and some plugins sound amazing. Use what sounds great.
And they can work well together.
Yeah.
Obviously,
absolutely.
right? You've talked a
Yeah.
lot about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Does technology drive the art, or because this has come up in this conversation, and it's come up
Yeah.
in a lot of our interviews and hangs, right? And you can chime in on this one if you want to.
We'll see.
I've got
Okay.
a good opinion
Does
on this.
technology drive the art, or does art drive the technology?
That is the classic chicken and egg, and there is no correct answer. What I will say is that the symbiotic relationship between a musical instrument designer and the artist is the only reason it all works. And if you think about the fact that we revere a bunch of old historic instruments, we don't revere them for the technology. We revere them because great musicians did something amazing with them.
That's right.
And there are some great products out there that maybe never ended up on a hit record that people, it's like this undiscovered gem. And there are products that at the time they came out, quite frankly, as competitors, we thought they sounded like crap. We thought this is a horrible sounding product. And then someone goes and uses it in an amazing way, and now everyone's got to have that sound.
It's basically the synth version of Tone is in the Hands.
That's really true, right? So it's like, I played you that preset that Prince used and that Jimmy Jams used a lot and so on, and you go, oh, I love that sound. We considered that to be like the cheesy organ sound.
Yep.
It didn't sound like a real, or it's kind of a Farfisa-y thing. They go and play it, right? And Jimmy Jam's done some great videos showing just some factory presets in the Oberheims that he's used on these amazing songs, used them completely different than we even imagined the preset. And that's what makes them special. So, but, was the turntable designed to be a musical instrument? I don't think so. But it became a musical instrument. It's creative people made use of it in a way that no one had thought of, and now it's a musical instrument, right? So what matters? I'd say ultimately, the artist that makes the music is the key to it all, but the technology is what inspires it. If no one had made a guitar amp that distorts, rock and roll never would have been born.
Yeah, I started gravitating to technology drives the art after I heard Robert Margolef say it. And I didn't really want to go there right away. And then I started looking at these historical examples, like Beethoven didn't have to play the Mozart clavichord
Right.
to get the volume of music. And Mahler's symphonies didn't have to play out-of-tune brass instruments. Like when you go from city to city, you couldn't even play these symphonic works in tune. And then the musicians wouldn't really want to play the instruments, so there wouldn't be like enough brass players. So the technology allowed for these bigger sounds to happen. Right? And then pipe organs evolved because they wanted it. And synthesizer technology comes from pipe organs. it's the thinking, you know,
Yeah,
16 foot, 8
absolutely.
foot, 4 foot.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
multiple sounds on one instrument.
Yeah, I think the thing is, so we can see so many shifts in music genres and everything that you can point to the specific technology that enabled that. I think what I'm kind of saying also is, I think the technology is actually irrelevant. Because
interesting.
whatever new technology gets created, an artist is going to do something interesting with it.
He's going to find whatever he has to be
That's-
creative because he has to be.
That's what's amazing.
Yeah.
Because so few of the early things were made for the purpose they ended up with, right? A Fender Rhodes was made to be a more portable piano for the Army. At least that's how the story goes, right?
Wasn't that the Wurlitzer?
It
Or
was-
was that the Fender
No,
Rhodes?
Fender Rhodes.
Fender Rhodes.
Oh.
And so it was an attempt, the goal was, can I make this sound like a piano? What's a different approach than long strings to make it sound like a piano? It sounds like its own thing. So if your measure was, does this sound like a piano? You go, this is crap.
I thought it was designed for funk,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
And that's exactly
you
your
could
point.
even make a similar analogy to like the SEM. This was made to run your sequencer so you still have
Right.
your mini Moog.
That's
Turns
what
out
it's for.
that accessory was perfect.
Well, and Tom's decision, it's like, you know, everyone does a 4-pole filter. It should be kind of a different color. Let's do this 2-pole state variable. And it's like, yeah, that was the whole thing.
That's the shred. That's the fizz. That's what cuts
that was
through.
it. Yeah.
That cut through everything. Okay, last lightning round.
Itchy nose.
Okay,
All right, go ahead.
Last lightning round question. AI creativity versus human creativity.
AI creativity doesn't exist. So I think there is only human creativity, but AI can masquerade quite well as human creativity, and it's only going to get better. My hope is that AI becomes a tool for creative people to unlock things in the ways that other tools are, right? I mean, we use so many different tools that make our lives easier, whether it's Photoshop to make a picture a little better or whatever. I mean, there are great tools, and AI can be, I think AI is an interesting collaborator for artists. But
So human creativity can't be quantified so that AI could emulate that?
I think you could be completely fooled. Yes, no, I think AI will be able to do that. Here's the thing. What we have to look at is, where are there creative applications where the value for us as humans is the creativity versus the output? So if I was in the business of doing jingles for commercials, or Foley, or sound effects for video games, like my daughter does, I would worry about my job long term, because those outcomes, the creative process is not the benefit. It's the outcome that you want, right? So you imagine if you shot a movie where you couldn't do any location sound, and AI is going to be able to look at that and put every footstep in and do all this other stuff. The goal is so that you don't even notice Foley existed, right? And it used to take a really good human to be able to do that. Someday, AI is just going to take those jobs, right? But if what we value is, there's something emotional we get when we go, this person created this. When we go see an artist perform live, that can never be replicated with AI. And if what we're enjoying is this artist, they're now performing for me in person, I'm experiencing live something that they personally created. So there's a personal connection. Just like TV and movies didn't replace theater. It means something to us when we see a real person on a stage performing something.
That's a very interesting psychological thing. And a doctor just told me that the same treatment issued to a patient that's awake, where they feel some degree of pain for the treatment, causes more healing process than the treatment that's administered when they're sleeping.
Wow. So the actual experience.
That's what you're
of it.
talking about, isn't it?
I don't know. I'm not sure I get that analogy. What I think I'm talking about is when we are, our brains function in a way where we're receiving so much information from our senses, from our memories and everything to create our reality, right? There is no reality, to get philosophical, right? It's just our perception of anything going on, right? If I bake you a birthday cake, say, look what I made for you. Here's this birthday cake, and we're celebrating your birthday, and we eat that birthday cake. That birthday cake tastes different to you just because you know I made it for you,
That's right.
right?
But why though? It releases different chemicals in my body.
Yeah, I mean, it's how our brain works, and all of that information all impacts even how we sense things, right? How we hear things changes. When people think that the sound changed when they used a $200 power cable, right? It can be scientifically proven that that does not change the sound. But you know what? It does change the sound for them.
Yep.
So you can't argue it. They're not lying. We can argue that it was like, Emperor's New Clothes or whatever. They actually hear it different. Because in their mind, it's like, I know I've got that better cable. And so like the placebo effect, right? I could tell you I switched the cable to the better cable, and you'll think it sounds better even if you didn't change it.
And healing can happen from placebo effect because it releases chemicals.
Exactly, right. All of that stuff happens. So all that to say that, if we go back to the birthday analogy, if I just have AI make your cake and I go, here, it might taste fine. It's not the same experience for you. Could be the exact same cake. It's not the same experience for you as the human interaction. So AI is going to take lots of jobs, it's going to change a lot of things and so on. But as long as humans actually enjoy what it is that we bring to each other,
Yep.
that part is the part AI can't touch. So that's.
And if I were to chime in, I would just say that I do believe that humans genuinely want to experience things with other humans. I don't think they want to do it with a robot. I would never even think in a million years that someone would say, we're going to go to Walt Disney Concert Hall to see a computer come up with something like Mozart. I can see that maybe happening at CalArts a couple times, but not on a regular basis.
That's probably why I don't go to much EDM performances.
Right.
Because to me, I'm going to offend some people. But it's like, seeing a musical performance where you just see someone behind a bunch of gear.
Well, a lot of Euro-rack performances.
Right. Well, but they're actually before. I don't know what I can say. It's like if there's long stretches of time where there isn't actually any performance that has to happen for the music to come out.
How often, what's the frequency that they have to touch it before it becomes going to touch you?
Well, when you talk about
That's
Euro-rack.
a good question. Yeah. I mean, at least some.
Well, yeah,
that's a bad
before
answer.
you get lonely.
Exactly.
Well, there has to be some unknown factor. If you talk about a Euro-rack performance, talk about somebody who has something set up, knows generally where they want to go, just like today with this interview, which is going to go really long now. And once you get to those intermediate steps, you're like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe I do want to turn up that knob, turn up the amount of modulation there. And that may take you somewhere else. And even though you know where you're going to go at some other point, it's still interesting. It's still live. It's still naturally occurring, even if it's a synthesizer, which is not really natural at all. And
well, the extreme is if someone doing a synthesizer performance had pre-programmed everything, and their performances, they go up and they hit start.
I did it. It was part of a series called Push, Play, and Walk Away on the Synclavier. And we put the Synclavier on the stage. It was paid for by Tom Moody, who was one of the earliest Synclavier owners.
Interesting.
Push, Play, and Walk Away.
So there was the marvel of people recognizing that was possible. Today, we wouldn't have quite the marvel of that newness, right? So, I mean, the extreme is if someone literally just hit play on their computer and it played a playlist, we wouldn't probably consider that to be a performance.
But I found that the audience was waiting for the guy to come back out there and do something. It's like push, play, and walk away. It's the frequency. It works for a while. Yeah. And it's like, we're hearing this machine play. Yeah. When's the guy going to come back out and do something? So it's and I don't know how long that time is.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what I'm wondering about.
Probably changes.
It probably depends on the person.
Long answers to your quick questions.
It's lightning round, so we're done. So thank you again for being our host here in your studio and giving us this in-depth, rare that no one else could give us, right, historical view and heartfelt view and firsthand, experience of what happened with, the thought process, a little bit of the business, the musicians that came in, the sound differences between all the instruments. So if anybody's interested in deciding on what instrument to get or use or hear on, on a record or whatever, I think you got a good guide here, right? And
My pleasure.
yeah, there's so much. And then I guess just the last thing, you want to just do a quick pan of where it all started, and we'll end there. We'll go backwards, right? From, we don't quite have an 8 voice, right? But we have a 4 voice.
You have to go to
here.
Rob's for the 8 voice.
So let's get this
We have a
4 voice, and then 2 voice.
2 voice.
Is that where it all started?
Yeah, they were very close in order, right? After the actually started the single SEM, then 2 voice, 4 voice, and then 8 voice.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, that's Oberheim in the 70s through the X, and then the 80s.
Okay, we're going across. Will's panning across. We're going through getting to the late 70s here, working our way up into the 80s right about now. Marcus, what
Yep.
year are we now?
Now
Keep
we're
going up.
81, and then the OB-8, 83, Xpander and 84, Matrix-12, 85. and
Matrix-12, 85 right here.
And then Matrix-6 at the top was at I believe the tail end of 85.
There you go. And then at the very top, that's the Matrix-6 at the tail end of 85. There's our Oberheim rack. So thank you, guys. Thank you, crew. Come on in, Rob.
My pleasure.
What a great hang. See you guys soon. Be sure to like and subscribe. See you on the next video.